we hear of the drugs coming in from out-of-town drug dealers. Is law enforcement being successful in cracking down on these dealers who are coming in from out of town? We just heard of a bust here in Plattsburgh within the past week, near Stafford Middle School. A number of the people arrested from Brooklyn, 350 bags of fentanyl, presumably ready for sale. Is law enforcement, narcotic units having success in rooting out the drug dealers who are bringing these drugs into our communities?
We are. I mean, I think law enforcement has had a lot of successes, but you know, it's never enough until we can fully eradicate this, and you know, that's a hefty goal. But the fact of the matter is, when there is money to be made out there, and like I've said, these large-scale drug dealers, I mean, you know, these are very organized structures. I mean, starting with, you know, cartels and gangs, things like that. You know, they are in this business to make a profit, and as long as there is money to be made preying on, you know, innocent victims, then they're going to continue to do so. So I mean, what we see so often is we pick people off, but you know, much like picking a weed, some come right back in their place. So you know, I think we've had a great deal of successes. We've taken a lot of fentanyl and other opioids off the street. But there's always work to be done.
And we talk about the opioid settlement money. What about the state legislature? Are lawmakers doing enough? There have been a few bills, but they went home this year without really taking any steps to address the overdose epidemic. Yes, there's talk about free Narcan and test strips, but should lawmakers be doing more to address this issue?
You know, we've certainly made progress. There's a lot of grant funding out there. The problem is that not everybody always knows about the grant funding. Not everybody is applying for it because they just may feel it doesn't apply to them. Grant funding is a funny thing. It requires a lot of work. So you know, if you have to spend days or weeks, I'm sure everybody up here is short-staffed. So it's having the resources to put into applying for those grants and getting the funding. So it's a multifaceted issue. I think we can always do more across the board. I'll say that.
Far be it from me to ever take a shot at government if you give me the opportunity, so I'll try hard not to do that. But I would tell you that I think our local leaders really do listen and hear what those of us up here are saying and try hard. You know, we're in a big state that caters to the city areas downstate in large part because it's voting. You know, I mean, the facts are you need those to remain in office, which is what people are looking for. So I think the more we can get them to understand what we're really trying to do longer term, the better off we are. And you know, this is a intricate disease with a whole lot of levels to it, and there's no one expert on this panel or out there who's going to be able to resolve this. But sometimes I don't think people who are in positions of real decision-making power listen enough to the people who are right there on the front lines actually doing this, and that might be a way to maybe use the money a little better than sometimes the way that we use it.
And if I may, you know, I've talked directly to Senator Harcum in the past. Senator Schumer's been up a few times, walked through our programs, looked at it. Steck, Billy Jones, they're big supporters. They're there when you need them. You reach out and you ask. Our Director of Community Services, I think all of them in our counties are very responsive. You know, but I think the clear answer is not enough and not fast enough. While they're figuring it out, one of the things that I experience over and over, I'll give you an example. In November, I'm going to go and do 2 community events speaking about adolescent brain development, the impact of trauma, the impact of substance use on it. And it's going to be in 2 different locations. Historically speaking, what my experience is going to be, I'm going to have about 12 people in the audience, whereas I should have a whole community in the audience because it matters. And unfortunately, with this topic, it's not real until it's real. Until you have a loved one that's struggling and suffering through this, it doesn't really become visceral. And so one of the things I would suggest is get out and get informed, get engaged, go to the Narcan trainings, check out the RV mobile unit. Whether you're using it or not, it doesn't matter. You know that it's a resource. So instead of waiting for government and politics to figure out the legislation that's going to solve it, just get engaged and love on people and be available for each other. You know, I think that's the best we can do while they do their work. We submitted and received an award to operationalize, it's called an IOTP, an Integrated Opioid Treatment Program. And so what that is a methadone clinic. Okay, so people will come daily and get their methadone dose and then go about their day. You can do guest dosing and whatnot. What they want to see, which we are completely supportive of, is that it's integrated with an outpatient clinic. The reason why that's so practical is because if you're going to see them regularly, you also literally have the staff you need to keep them engaged should they need supports and services. So in Saranac Lake, we have the Robert Rice Community Center, which houses the outpatient clinic, our open access center, which has a peer on call 24/7, and we will operationalize this methadone clinic. Now, again, kind of talking to what Chief and Vanessa were talking about earlier around, you know, are people comfortable with it? There's discomfort out there. What's happening though is what we're seeing is with medication-assisted therapies, things like Suboxone, Sublocade, that it's being diverted, and people are looking for street drugs to meet their needs instead of their prescribed medication. And so as a result, obviously the risk goes up. And the fentanyl specifically has such a short half-life that you get addicted so quickly to it that your threshold, the amount you need to feel the same effect, is much higher than what Suboxone can help alleviate. So what do? You either need more of that illicit substance, or methadone is it's a suitable alternative to be able to get the dose that you need without having to turn towards unhealthy behaviors.
The idea behind this is if the insurance companies were not so short-sighted and didn't just look at it in terms of it costs me X thousands of dollars to send somebody to treatment for 30 days, and said if the outcome of sending one person to treatment that costs me $50,000 once is that we get them to become a productive member of society living on their own, functioning, isn't that better than it costing me $20,000 every 2 years because all we're doing is having them regurgitated through the system? This is my problem with treating the symptoms of this as opposed to the actual root causes. And it's been set up here. That's what we really need to be doing. And that may mean somebody needs to be at St. Joe's for 6 months or a year paid for so that they can actually do that, or get out and go to a place. That's where a lot of the issue comes from. It's not a knock on St. Joe's, Alliance, MHAB, anybody else. We're all doing the best we can with the money that we have. But until society in general looks and says, this problem is not about 30, 60, 90 days or safe needle exchange or strip kits or any of those, or MHAB or any of those things. It's all of those things comprehensively surrounding somebody for a lengthy period of time, up to and including their whole life. As somebody, and then you can tell me to stop talking, Tom, as somebody that's been in recovery for a long time, the truth is I'm still connected to the recovery program. I still have people that I talk to, and I still have issues. The idea of me going back to using any substance is probably not going to happen, but I also know that if I don't continue to guard against those things, it can lead me back to that. That's the reason why we talk about this in terms of long term, not short term. Whenever we have these discussions, Tom, and I've had a lot of them with you, it always comes out to that. It has to be multifaceted and has to be much bigger and grander than it is. And it's not that we don't have the money. If you go back and look since the beginning of the DEA back in the early 70s, and it was probably even earlier than that, we've spent trillions of dollars on this. Not billions, trillions of dollars trying to do this, and the problem continues to get worse. Somewhere along the way, we should say to ourselves, okay, maybe we need to change. What I love about this panel, we're starting to do that. You're starting to hear that on the ground, we're actually doing things differently. Now we need the people who sit above us to come on board and realize that we do know how to do this. And if you allowed us, we could help these people get better.
And you mentioned businesses. Are there businesses stepping up and doing that?
There are in our area. But a lot of that is driven by, there's a few of us that are committed to this. So we're out there driving it. And I think the chief said it, most of the time you don't get people involved in this until it directly affects their family. But it's directly affecting a lot of families. What I'd like to do is start getting these people involved in this before it affects your family, before you bury your 14-year-old daughter or son Let's get you involved in this and understand that it's a real possibility. This isn't a character flaw. Your son's not a bad person if they wind up being involved in the drug business. It's an illness, and we need to be treating it as such and talking in that terms.
Along with the settlement money, OSS has also been blanketing the airwaves across New York State with ads. I think we've probably all seen them, where they're offering free Narcan and free test strips. All you have to do is get in touch with them, and they'll send it to you. But Vanessa, you mentioned that there may be a bit of a delay in getting that for folks. They may not have it within the next few days or very quickly.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure before I am advising clients, friends, family to order supplies that I try it myself so I can give a little bit more guidance on it. So I did try ordering supplies, and the need is there, so the demand is high. And so there is a delay in supplies, and I want to make sure that anyone who needs these supplies or wants these supplies, they are available in our community. We can get them to you any day of the week. You can give us a call. You can send us a text message. We don't need any information. We just want to get the supplies to you. And so until they get that demand under control again, we want to make sure that everyone has what they need.
Right, which we're putting up on the screen right now, so they can get in touch with Alliance for Positive Health. Obviously, there's the vending machine in Saranac Lake as well. Michael, one thing I wanted to touch on with you is one of the biggest things that we're still trying to overcome is the stigma, or stigmas.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think in the 35 years that I've been kind of involved in this, it's much better than it was, and it gets better all the time. But I think that word, you need to break that word down a little bit and understand that there's stigma across the board with regards to this. There's stigma with law enforcement being people that just want to arrest us and put us in jail. There's stigma with the community not wanting to help when they're there. There's stigma amongst people who aren't afflicted with this, that it's a moral failing on the people who are involved in drugs and not understanding that it really is a sickness, not a moral failing. You know, most of us that have been through it didn't set out to destroy my life. I didn't set out to be a homeless guy buying drugs when I was 26 years old. That wasn't my goal. But when I got there, I had no ability to do anything. The flip side of that stigma, and this doesn't get talked about enough, is that we, the people who go through treatment and get into recovery, also need to realize that we carry a stigma, that somehow we're different and we look at people differently. And I work hard with the MHAB residents to make sure that they don't carry that stigma around, that the officer is not your enemy, that Alliance for Positive Health is not your enemy, that society is not against you. There are a lot of people that will help you. So I think it's really, really, really a big component of it. But that moral defect piece, that idea that people are bad, and I say this and I'll say it really quickly, it's because if you take cancer and addiction and put them together, or substance use disorder, and put them side by side, everybody is sympathetic to the cancer patient, in large part because the cancer patient isn't sticking their hand in mom's purse stealing money to go out and get high. People can accept the illness. It's the behavior that goes with the illness that makes so many people upset about it. That's where the issue comes in. I don't know how to resolve that. I just know from doing this for so long peripherally that that's a lot of what happens with stigma.
Some of the more progressive members of the legislature have talked about the need for safe injection sites. New York City obviously has them, Canada has them, Montreal has them. Is this something that we're hearing more people talk about, or is that still not, in most people's opinion, a solution, or at least a positive step?
I think it's being talked about, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that we need to talk about the current harm reduction services that we're providing and get folks on board there. The data shows that safe injection sites work, but we need to get there, and I think we were talking about common ground a couple of times. We need to find that common ground first before we dive into that.
Okay, Chief.
One thing that I really like that Mike said is, you know, talking about this as an illness and really just getting society to recognize it as that. You know, I think one thing, I teach mental health for officers in multiple police academies, and you know, one thing that we always say kind of, you know, on one of the first days is, you know, give us a word to describe someone with cancer, and you always hear sick or dying. And then, you know, if you were to ask that same question about someone with, you know, a substance abuse disorder, then what are the things you're going to hear, right? You're going to hear junkie or drug addict or things like that. And truly, these people are sick. So I think, really getting to recognize that. So I just wanted to kind of comment on Mike's comment there. In regards to the safe injection sites, I'll kind of echo what Vanessa said, is that I don't think we're there yet, but I think we have to explore any and all measures that are going to help combat this crisis.
Thank you. Zach?
Yeah, a little bit harder line on this one. I think we need to talk about them. We need to talk about anything that can prolong life long enough to help somebody get the help that they need. Is it going to be scary? Is it going to be out of our comfort zone? Absolutely. But from what I've seen in terms of research, we were just talking about, we already have individuals that are out there injecting and engaging in IV drug use. And if they're using dirty water and they're using unclean needles and they're reusing needles, the health risks, not only for themselves but the people around them, are so much. It's just worth the conversation, in my opinion.
Mike?
So you waited till the end to bring up this piece
I-
so that we couldn't have a physical altercation up
That's
here
right.
over this.
That's right.
So I'm one of the people who's not there yet. I don't necessarily buy into it, in large part because I'm an abstinence-based guy. I believe in abstinence. But I will tell you that I think I would love to, if I could write the script for what would happen in treating this illness, I would say that abstinence should be the goal. Because I think if we get to a place where people are abstinent and don't need to feel different about themselves because they're okay with who they are, that would be great. Fully understanding that there's a whole lot of stuff that gets them there. So, safe injection sites for me just give me too much pause for concern at this point. I buy into a lot of harm reduction, and I'll leave you with this. At the last panel we had when we talked about this, my stance was, if we really believe in harm reduction, and we believe that harm reduction is about saving lives, then stop nipping around the edges. Stop doing little and that isn't a knock on anybody here, it's a knock on government and society. Stop doing little things. If what we're really talking about is saving lives, then go the extra mile to give these people everything that they need all the time until they ultimately get to that place of recovery. So if people that sit in positions of power are going to talk about we're trying to save lives, I say BS, because if you're really trying to save lives, there are 75 other things that we can be doing along the way that will make everybody else's life up here easier and will ultimately save lives. But we don't want to do that because there's that view of, well, then I'm enabling people. So we play this kind of little dance on the edges with regards to this. So that's my take on harm reduction. I fully understand it, and if we can save lives long enough to people get to that place that we hope they'll get to, then we should be doing it. But this is something that would need a lot of discussion, I think, before you're going to get mainstream society to buy into these.
Which we see. I mean, there's only 2 sites in the United States right now, in both in New York City. So, yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to wrap it up is we are still in a crisis. We're still in the midst of an overdose epidemic. But is there optimism, perhaps now that we didn't see or feel even a few years ago, that we are making progress or can make progress?
I think the optimism is that we're here and we're having the conversation. To have 4 different entities all moving in the same direction with the same common goal is huge. And I know for myself that these conversations will continue, after the cameras go off, and we'll continue to build upon these relationships, which is only going to help. One small conversation like this can build into really a life-changing initiative, and that's kind of what started with conversations with the Alliance. That's how we ended up with this vending machine, is just small conversations, and it snowballed into what we have now. So I think that's the positive outlook, is that we're here and that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
I do think that the numbers are still very scary. I mentioned earlier, lives are still being lost. But the conversations are being had. They're being had at our dinner table. They're being had with family and friends. We recently did an Narcan training at SUNY Plattsburgh for all the RAs there. It was a special time for me to go there because I was an RA myself 12 years ago. And we did not talk about drugs on that campus whatsoever. It wasn't a problem according to administration. Our students don't use drugs, but we're using them in our off-campus housing. We were using them in the dorm rooms. And so it is now a required training for RAs. It is important for them to know that all of their residents coming to this campus are going to be faced with decisions. They're going to be using substances, and they need to be prepared to support their residents and also make those referrals to maybe somewhere outside of the campus, whether it's us across the street from Hawkins Pond. And so the conversations are being had, and that's what's really important. And it's not going in one ear out the other.
Thanks. Zach?
If there's hope, there's hope. And I think that's the point, is a subjective piece to this you can't really quantify. And that is, there's a lot of people out there that want to help and want to try and create opportunities for change. And I think as long as we have that cohort, then it's all about just how do we get the numbers? How do we get people involved? How do we get them engaged? How do we help them understand how they fit and what their identity and purpose is? And I think if we do that, then we'll continue to see this snowball go the right direction. I think if we continue as a society to be more antisocial and be more isolated, unfortunately, like we had to during COVID, it's going to get much more difficult. So, bottom line for me, this is just as much about the spirituality of mankind. Is everybody worthy of dignity and respect? Do we have inherent value or not? And my belief strongly is yes, we are all inherently priceless. How do we treat each other that way on a regular basis?
And Michael, MHAB's been up and running since early 2019. Are you seeing success? Are you optimistic?
Yeah, we've actually had pretty good numbers that leave our place. We don't track after they leave, but we're in the 40% range of people that are leaving there with a job, going to a place to live, have been clean and sober for a period of time. So we think those numbers are good. This isn't a perfect science. It'd be nice if everybody we put into a place, got this, but that's not necessarily what happens. So we're incredibly happy with it. I think that we're making progress. The chief said it very well, that you have people up here that come from disparate backgrounds and probably don't agree on everything and may not even agree on a lot of things. But I will tell you that what I've learned in the 30 plus years I've been doing this is that the heart of the people who sit at tables like this or are on the front lines of this should never be questioned. The level of integrity that we have in trying to help people is beyond what most people understand. In 30 plus years of doing this, I personally know more than 200 people who have died from this disease in some form or another. 200. It's way too many. Every time I go to a funeral, I get upset, I cry, it rips my heart out. I go, why? I don't understand it. That's the reason why I still do this. Until we eradicate this, the chief said one thing, and I'll close with this. My goal for MHAB, and I'm a private business person, my goal for MHAB is to close the doors. If I had to just pay the mortgage off and eat the money, it would make me happy, because that would mean that we've eradicated the problem that's destroying American families.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.